visibility of compliance or legal being brought in, because they actually see in corporations now understand that culture or the possibility of having a toxic culture is a tremendous financial, operational, and reputational risk. And so we're being brought in by technology innovation departments, we're being brought in by HR, we're being brought in by compliance and legal. We're being brought in by sales and marketing because the tool, the Kind Queue, is really beautiful and really viral. So for instance, with the Gates Foundation, we tripled their database in 2 months, right? Just with the virality of it. They only did one Facebook post and one Instagram post. And so the ability to bring in very high quality acquisition of new donors, new consumers. So there's multiple ways to use the product.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Defo Data Channel podcast. I'm your host Deepak, and with me we have Miss Erin Michelson. Erin is Summery's founder and CEO, supervising the company's strategic decision, business development, and client relationships. She is leading a team of scientists to investigate how we can measure or quantify organizational performance and cultural alignment. And Erin is a public speaker and thought leader on technology trends. So it's a pleasure to have you here today, Erin, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, John.
Great to hear. So I have a couple of questions for you today, and starting with this one. So, what are the different practical metrics for monitoring organizational culture and values?
Well, thanks, John. That's a great question because that's the core of what we do here at Summery. As you said in your introduction, I lead a team of behavioral, cognitive, and data scientists. And what we have created was a way to actually quantify individual values like empathy, integrity, innovation, disruption, and agility. We've also are using AI technologies to quantify organizational culture and measure the difference between the two. So sort of the aspirational values of an organizational culture with the actual values of their key stakeholders.
Right, right. Okay. So, over to the next question. So, what are the various AI technologies that can be used to monitor these metrics, and like how efficient and effective is this? Are these algorithms?
Yes, we're using several AI technologies. We're using machine learning, several different types of machine learning, actually, and natural language processing as well. So the core of our IP is really a semantic map that we've created, our scientists, around culture. And to do that, we do a number of things. First and foremost, we actually use ML to understand, as I said, individual values. Our main individual measurement tool is called the Kind Queue, and it's just a 5-minute web app asking binary questions about individuals. We put, actually, since it's behavioral science, we put them in a situation and we force them to make an answer the question. And from that, we're able to, even within 5 minutes, it's very quick, very easy, very beautiful. And within 5 minutes, we're able to look at 98,304 different combinations of an individual's value profile. We look at it, of course, in terms of kindness. That's why it's called the Kind Queue. But that's one way that we're using our ML. A second way that we're using it is, for instance, with the NLP, where we're going out and actually taking all the publicly available data about an organization and running it through, as we say, the 5 values as well to understand what the company says their values are. So again, we look at this in terms of aspirational values, anything they have out that they put out themselves in the public marketplace to ascertain what they want their culture to be or what they want others to think their culture is.
Great, great. So, so do you believe these AI technologies can go autonomous in measuring and providing the inference? And what are the typical challenges you observe here?
Absolutely. We are very dedicated and worked very hard at making everything automated actually on our end. So from, as I said, just the 5-minute instantly after you take our survey, the individual, it's a really great experience for the individual because somebody, number one, asks them what their values are. They are able to download immediately a 3-page overview of their value profile. They're given 3 actual activities. We created a database, a proprietary database of 25,000 global social impact activities like giving and volunteering and learning, and we match them up with the individual at that 98,000th level. So 3 specific activities. And then because we're a social impact company, we make a donation on behalf of the community values. And so we ask people what their values are. We give them the value profile. We give them a way to instantly activate their values, and then we honor their values. And so in that way, it's very quick. We've also automated two other areas which I think are really crucial to our product. The second is all our reporting. So in that 5 minutes, we are monitoring more than 50 KPIs. And we also do what we call, after 2 weeks, a baseline report or a summary report, which is where we get our name. And that's a deep dive. That's 15 to 20 pages of all the data that comes in. We do have real behavioral science eyes against it as well. And then we have quarterly reports that come out. And so all of that's automated. And one of the reasons we did this is because early on, we were providing our clients with all this incredibly rich data, a brand new data set that had never been created before around individual and organizational values. And even though we prescribed activities, it was left to the organizations to implement that. And then so several years ago, we have now automated that as well. So once an individual takes the kind cue, every month after that, we automatically curate activities for that individual on a monthly or weekly basis so that they can continue to change their behavior or change their values or enrich their values. And then we can monitor that on an ongoing basis. So it's great for the organizations that we work with, because after the initial 10-day launch, everything's automated for the next year after that: reporting, activities, a continual analytics.
That's actually pretty impressive. And I
Yeah,
could
it's
actually see the
robust.
complexity. I could see the complexity behind that, because processing that many topics, it's very, very hard
Yeah,
and
I
complex.
mean, and I think that's one of the core challenges with data today, is that there's so much data, right? And then what do you do with it when you deliver it? So we've solved that challenge. We gather the data, we analyze the data, and then we activate the data all within one tool.
Perfect, perfect. That's pretty nice. So over to the next point, like where um how can organizations like there are cases where organizations fake these data, and like how can AI be used to kind of detect and track them effectively?
Well, yeah, let's talk for a second about how organizations use our data, right? Because we work in multiple verticals. So we work with large enterprise companies, like Salesforce was our first company, continues to be one of our largest clients. Meta, we work with NASDAQ, for instance. We also work in philanthropy. We got our start in philanthropy. That was the genesis of the kernel of the idea when I created the technology. And so we work again with large foundations, global foundations like the Gates Foundation, all the way down to small nonprofits that have operating budgets of $1 million. Now we've also moved into, we have a whole higher ed arm. So we're looking at how values differ between university administration versus faculty versus students, working with organizations like NYU and Stanford and the California Community College system. And now we've just moved into financial institutions as well. So they're using our product in a commercial sense in terms of actually better matching up consumers with socially impact investing, for instance, philanthropic products. And so we could use it with employees, we could use it with consumers, we could use it with students, and we could use it with donors.
Okay, okay, perfect. So like could you actually provide us some like practical examples of case studies where like AI is extensively used to monitor the organization culture or like these kind of standards?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love to give examples, actually. We have so many great success stories. But let's talk about one that I think is really interesting, which is the California Community College system that we work with. So we've been brought in by chancellors and presidents, so sort of at the highest level. And I really love the community colleges. Number one, it's the largest educational organization in the United States. And number two, it's a way to really help and serve underrepresented groups. Most of the students in, or many of the students, I should say, in community colleges are first generation college students and come from more challenging backgrounds. And so I love working with them. Not that I have a favorite client. I love them all, of course. But with the California Community College system, they brought us in actually to look at, as I said, the individual differences. So we have two tools, both kind cues. One is sort of a classic version for employees corporation, and one is a student version built for students age 15 and above. And so we launched it, but both tools are measuring the same things, right? Agility, disruption, innovation, integrity, and empathy. And so we deployed it within the college system, and then we're able to have this really rich data of the different value structures within the key stakeholders there. And so not only were we able to do that, but what actually we're able to do was take our NLP to go out and again, scrape and score all publicly available information about the organization. In this case, it was the Education Institute, the college. So sustainability reports, mission statements, job descriptions, social media, anything that the organization puts out, and then understand their culture that way. What we're able then to do is see the delta between the two. Again, who the organization, the college in this case, wanted their community to understand their culture to be, and the actual stakeholders of three different groups. And then we measured that delta. We come up with a score. It's called the net culture score. It's our second product. And we're able then to discern. So we break it down. And the net culture score of just like one of these colleges was in the 90s, which is very high. That means there's a lot of alignment between the organizational culture and the stakeholders. Now, in our parlance, we really look at alignment and being in alignment as a healthy culture, right? One that does not have a lot of toxicity, but is in alignment. But you don't want too much alignment because there's too much groupthink. And so with a score like 90, a higher score isn't necessarily better, especially for this college and this client. So we help our clients interpret their scores. They actually wanted more disruption, more innovation. And so then once we saw the scores, a score of 90, a lot of alignment. So we wanted to increase the behavior and increase innovation and disruption, particularly with the faculty, because they actually had lower innovation scores than either the students or the administration. And so we curated activities to build innovation amongst the faculty. And really interesting, we prescribed student-led activities because that's where the innovation was in the organization. So that's just one example of how we're looking at a very holistic view of an organization and how we can nudge and change behavior, and then in the end, change the culture to be more innovative over time. Now, what's also interesting about this client is not only did we do it for this college, we've done it for multiple campuses of the college. It was also a district, so multiple colleges, multiple campuses within a college, and then like are very similar colleges, community colleges in the same area. So then we had many, 5 or 6, actually there's 10 or 12 different colleges that we were comparing all of these data. So it's an incredibly rich data source that then was instantly used to create more innovation, which is what the client wanted.
Those are really interesting use cases actually, and I would say, like, coming from a very what to say like traditional AI background to a what to say into a modern NLP era where like these kind of pretty interesting use cases are actually being utilized, or like AI is being utilized for these kind of stuff, which is really great actually, I would say. And over to the data aspect of these kind of problems. So you did mention that you are actually scraping or like getting some data from public websites or news articles. So like, what are the other data sources where like AI models are actually like used in these kind of problem statements, basically?
Mm-hmm. So for us, it's used in a number of ways. And I could, if we take that example I mentioned, but move it to a corporate environment, it's used in a couple different ways. So if we just stick with corporations and students for a moment, for instance, we work with a partnership with NASDAQ, and we're able then to understand the individual values of the student, again, their levels of empathy, integrity, disruption, as well as the culture of the NASDAQ companies. And then we're able to match the students up with internship opportunities at corporations that have either similar or diverse or complementary values. And in that end, what it does is it actually increases the success of the student during their internship, which is incredibly important because it has an end result there. So that's like another way that we use it, is this incredible automated matching technology that we're using. And again, our secret sauce is our ability to quantify and understand a very detailed matrix and textured matrix of these values to understand and do this high personalized matching. So if you look at another corporate client of ours, let's again stick with Salesforce, we're actually in 27 of their offices around the world, and we're able to localize our matching there along. So we're matching on values, engagement preferences, social cues, localization, and then able to really activate their activities that way through social impact. And that's amazing too, to be able to bring in this localization.
Okay, okay, got it. So, um, so when you talk about the reliability of these kind of data sources which can be used, like how effective? Because the entire AI system and whatever be the technology, that purely depends on the training which we actually provide. So, like, how can we quantify, or like how good is this particular data?
Mm-hmm. So we're a team of scientists, so we test all the time, continually. This is what we do. So from the get-go, when we created the Kind Cube, we're now on version 3.5, so it has several different versions. But when we first created it, we did very extensive validity and reliability testing. And that's to make sure that obviously what we're testing with our questions is actually what we want to be testing. So in this case, we're testing the levels of empathy and integrity. And so the definitions of empathy and integrity are incredibly important. So what we did there, in addition to our validity testing, is we did something called crowd truthing, which is fairly new out of the University of Texas at Austin. Just a couple years ago, it was developed. And that allows us to decrease the bias in our questions to get a more accurate, a more representative view of the definition of one of our values, like empathy. So for instance, we tested through crowd truthing in 40 different countries the definition of empathy. And it's a very extensive test in terms of validity. It's not just define what empathy is, it's define what it's not, and several other layers as well. And so in that case, it made sure that it wasn't our Summery scientific team's definition of empathy. It's actually the crowdsourced and most universally accepted definition of empathy. That's extremely important in terms of not just the validity of it, but again, decreasing as much bias as we can. A second way we actually used it as well is in reliability testing. And this is, we test initially with college students again, which is great because they were in class. And so we could test it multiple times during a semester, 10 days to 2 weeks apart, which is a good amount of time for testing. But what really sort of was crazy and just really kind of nuts and blew our socks off, was wild, is that we just had our 6-year anniversary as a company a few months ago. And like all good geeks, we threw a birthday party where we tested data. That was our birthday party. And so we're testing the original Kind Q from 4 years ago to now, because we had the same participants take it, and the reliability came in at 77%, which is literally astronomical. So now we're doing reliability testing over 4 years, and that is absolutely amazing in terms of the accuracy.
Perfect. So that's actually a good feeling actually whenever we are
Oh,
actually
it was
finding that.
great. It was the best birthday present, right? And so that, yeah, like I said, it was a party and a present for all of us.
Great to hear actually, and really happy to see that. So, so basically on the solution aspect, like, could you talk a bit about the solution we are actually creating for this effectiveness or that particular aspect of that study?
Sure, let's talk a little bit. I think what you're asking the question is really getting to is what's the benefit of what we're doing, right? And so the benefit is, if you look at executives, and because we use an evidence-based scientific basis, so we're not talking full surveys, we're not talking a Likert scale, this is highly scientific, that we come in and we ask these questions of key stakeholders. It enables the executives in these organizations to have transparent and objective assessment of the culture. And that's incredibly important because we work in this area broadly framed as the S, or the social in ESG, right? Environmental, social, and governance. And we are one of the few companies that actually are a niche player and really focused on the S. And we are the only ones who are able to quantify the S, or the social capital, for organizations. And so this is a brand new, evolving field. There is no established framework right now. We are certainly at the forefront of it. We map not only to the UN SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals. So there's 17 of them. So we match that. That is one of the most universal frameworks anyway that's out there. We also map to the ISO standards for D&I. So that's the International Standards for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, which is also an incredibly useful indicator and framework for culture. And we map up to 40 of those actions. So we are absolutely at the forefront of using the established frameworks, and then as they evolve, really starting to codify it, to create an active framework. And so by doing this and using these frameworks and incorporating it into our tools, we're able to do this very objective, very transparent reporting to the C-suite and to boards of directors. And that's where we're seeing it. So initially, when we worked with companies, we were being brought in by the product and innovation units with technology companies, which I think is fascinating because they need disruption, right? If you look at the different industries, they have different industry needs. So technology, you definitely want to be high disruption. In banking, you might want to be high innovation, or high integrity. In marketing, you want to be high innovation, et cetera. And so not only does it differ within industries, it differs within the job descriptions, right? If you're an engineer, you might want to be disruptive as well. You always want to be pushing the boundaries. Whereas if you're a customer service agent, you might want to be more empathetic, right? And so it is actually a science to kind of figure out the best value profile for the company overall, the employee base overall, and the job description. And so what we don't want, though, is a monolith, as I said in my example before, where it was actually too closely aligned. You want at least a little bit of disruption and innovation in there. And so executives are getting this unbiased, as much as possible, unbiased reporting that can't be cherry picked by executives or greenwashed externally or internally, which is sometimes what we see. And I don't think it's as deliberate. Sometimes it is, but it's more just a not understanding the data because it is a brand new field and it is so complex. And unless you are a data scientist, it's hard to understand the prescriptive value of it. And so by removing, again, the way to misuse or misinterpret the data, because we automatically analyze it for our clients and provide this very transparent, objective analysis for them. And they're being used, as I said, by product and innovation units, bringing us in to make sure that they have, and they're feeding disruption among the behavior and the mindset of their key employees. We see it, for instance, with HR and corporate CSR in terms of social justice within the organization be brought in, and we're actually matching. Some organizations use our tool to match up with individual performance reviews to actually gauge employee engagement, because that's a sign of greater productivity. And then we're seeing, actually new now, that's come on the last year, newer, is this ability of compliance or legal being brought in, because they actually see, and corporations now understand that culture, or the possibility of having a toxic culture, is a tremendous financial, operational, and reputational risk. And so we're being brought in by technology innovation departments, we're being brought in by HR, we're being brought in by compliance and legal. We're being brought in by sales and marketing, because the tool, the KindQ, is really beautiful and really viral. So for instance, with the Gates Foundation, we tripled their database in 2 months, right? Just with the virality of it. They only did one Facebook post and one Instagram post. And so the ability to bring in very high quality acquisition of new donors, new consumers. So there's multiple ways to use the product.
Okay, thank you for actually that entire clarification. That's very helpful. So yeah, so over to the next particular part on the implementation side, where it really looks like really tough. So what are the implementation glitches for these use cases when deploying these kind of models in the production?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, implementation is interesting. We've made a couple good decisions in our company. And one of the three good decisions that I think as a CEO we made, that the second one we made, the first is that we didn't take funding, actually, that we bootstrapped it, and everybody associated with Summery is owner of the company, which gives us a lot of flexibility because we are a privacy first ethical data company. And so we are very motivated by our mission and are able to make decisions to stay that way and take this very highly ethical approach. So that was a core decision of ours. The second core decision leads exactly to your question, which is we did build a competing platform. And that was really smart of us because platforms are expensive, they're time consuming to move it in. So we are simply a series of web-based apps. And what that does is that means we can launch in 24 hours. We can integrate with existing systems. So for instance, if we're talking with HR companies, the big human resource information system, HRIS, these are massive systems in companies like think Workday, et cetera, or think about client relationship management, CRM systems like at Salesforce systems. So instead of building a competing system, we're simply a web-based app. So we can launch immediately to start with pilots, which is a lot of ways that we start with our organizations. And then we just deliver the data in whatever way that they want. It could be a flat file if you're a smaller nonprofit. Right now, we're building out our API framework and custom integrations and all that. And so it makes it a much more nimble, and it makes it much more cost effective for our clients.
Okay, that's nice. So, so like on this particular part where like what are the chances of these kind of in production, like whenever kind of working with these kind of models, normally what happens is over the period of time the performance can change, or over the period of time it can decay. That means like in terms of business aspect or in terms of the performance aspect. So how are we kind of validating this, and how are we kind of boosting over the period of time these kind of techniques basically?
Great question. I think that's really important, right? We have to always be continuing to improve our product and be responsive. We are behavioral science team, so we understand that we live in a dynamic environment, and that means we work in a dynamic environment in terms of personally, what's going on in my personal life, in terms of my work life, am I getting hired, promoted, a new project, in terms of the organizational dynamic environment. Are they being acquired? Are they accelerating, excelling, et cetera? And so, and then the broader world too, like what's going on economically, politically. So you have to be, again, really agile as a product to be able to be responsive. And we've done that in a couple of ways. So just two examples I'll give you. First is, after the George Floyd murders, we are able, as I said, we have a custom database that we created, 25,000 global social impact activities. Everything we do is remote and online. And after the George Floyd murders, we instantly added 2,000 more social impact activities because we're seeing greater interest in social justice. And so we're able to be very responsive and add to our database so that we can continue to offer a greater variety and more topical activities to do. Another example would be with COVID. We constantly update the COVID resources because they get old, right? So around healthcare, which is one of the areas where we curate, we want to make sure. So we're always revisiting our database. So we have a social impact database, and then we also have a workforce development database as well. So we have two databases, and then many times we create custom databases for our clients. It's very normal for us to do. The second example I would give in terms of how we're being agile is our ability to continually assess the product. This goes back to your validity and reliability question earlier, right? And so when we did version 3.5 that we launched at the beginning of this year in January, we saw from our data, going back again 4 or 5 years now, that we could create two profiles that were more accurate than two others. And so we had 10 profiles. So again, you and I would take the kind Q out of the 98,300, we actually designated 10 broad profile types, or kind Q profiles, basically. And so we looked at it and we saw the data, and we saw the 10, and 8 were very representative, and the other 2 were, but we thought a different combination or 2 different profile types would be more representative. And so we updated that and then updated all of our technology for that. So that's a way to constantly, as we see culture externally, internally, personally being changed and the environment being changed, that we are able to be very nimble in how we're making our product responsive.
So, like, could you talk a bit about your wonderful team and their work culture and like their background in this space, basically?
Yeah, our team is the best. I don't know what to say. Like, it is actually the reason why we're successful to this day, hands down. And I have to say, like, as founder and CEO, is the thing I am most proud of is keeping our team together. So for this full 6 years, our entire team, we're a small team of 10 because everything's automated. We're always been remote, and we work very closely together with multidisciplinary backgrounds and different profile types, which is, I think, again, a key to the success of being very disruptive in what we're doing. We're a high disruptive company working in technology and AI. And so, for instance, we've had our lead scientist, our lead data scientist, our lead creative director been with us from day one. And even our behavioral scientist team and all that been with us for at least 5 years. And so it's incredibly dedicated team, which is, again, almost unheard of in the tech space, to keep this level team. These are people with backgrounds from Harvard and Stanford and CMI and everywhere else. Like, they can work wherever they want in technology. And the fact that they choose to work with Summery is incredibly humbling. And I think the reason why they do is because we are a social enterprise, right? We are a for-profit. But we are a social impact firm, and it's our mission of trying to help people better understand their values and create cultural change and systems change, which ties it all together. And I think our core culture is what makes us so incredibly productive and a healthy work environment.
Great, great to hear. So
Thank you for
like,
that question. I'd love to talk about the team.
nice, nice. No, no, I like when we actually had the catch up like before also, like you did mention about your team. It was really nice. So I thought of asking this particular question today. So on the collaboration side, like what are the industrial collaborations where the summary team has been involved with?
Well, the Summery team's involved in every aspect. I'm a non-technical founder, so I'm a solo female founder of non-technical of an AI technology company. So the team does it all, I have to say. So they're involved every step of the way. I have 3 degrees in political science, you know what I mean? And so, well, I come to this, and my background was in studying subsystems and system design and system theory, which does sort of make sense, and some game theory and things in my background. It does make sense. It is the Summery team in our way that we pull together from our multidisciplinary background to actually create these tools, right? In terms of sort of an anthropological look at it, from a neuroscience look at it, from a creativity look at it, from the UI and all of that. I mean, we're now in 146 countries and multilingual, and we've been able to do that in a way that resonates around the world because, again, of this international multidisciplinary team of thinkers that we have. So, I think that's just great. And as we're looking at how it's starting to be deployed, like in the future, we're continuing to expand our markets. So right now we're really interested in working with first responders, for instance, with the police department, and how to actually perhaps look at the police department and the culture of policing in the United States in particular, and how we could perhaps build more empathy within the culture, for instance. So we're very interested in that. We've been tapped a little bit to be working with faith-based organizations. And so we're talking with people about coming in and working with 8 different faiths around the world as a collective to actually look at and highlight shared values, which I think is a really beautiful, beautiful idea, to come in to look at our shared values around the world for basically 80% of the population that are faith believing. And so that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, we just brought in a new advisor at the beginning of the year to look at Web3. We're very interested in Web3 as a decentralized source of data and data ownership and all of that. And so really looking at that is interesting. We've been approached by a number of partnerships that we haven't moved forward with because it wasn't the right partner, but we're looking very carefully at Web3 as a new mode of deployment as well.
Great, great to hear. So yeah, so like apart from this particular idea and solution, like what are the other solution which the team is actually actively involved in?
Mm-hmm. So we're not doing any more solutions. So we have 3 products, right?
Okay.
So using 2 main technologies. We have the KindQ, which measures individual values. We have the Net Culture Score, which measures a company's aspirational culture to very different technologies that are used there, methodologies. And then we have a new product called the social capital score, using the same methodology as the net culture score that looks at public perception of an organization's culture. So right now we have three products that measure who a company says they are, who a company actually is by their key stakeholder values, and the public perception of that company. And to us, that's absolutely solid. We're a small company. We don't need to do any more than that right now. So with those three products, we've also spent over a year doing product market testing and go-to-market strategy. So right now, in the future, we're taking these products, as I say, we continue to test and to deploy and use it in all kinds of different ways. We're always refining our reporting, absolutely. One area that we're expanding into as well at large corporation are ERG, so employee resource groups. So these are groups within an organization that are veterans or ability status or LGBTQ, identification or race or ethnicity and all these instances. So this has added a whole other DE&I lens to the work we do. So that's very exciting. So we're very happy with our three products. We are developing and continuing to deepen the types of data that we collect and how we present it. And then we're really looking at just forming strategic partnerships. So now we're not working as much with individual universities, but working with organizations that represent 20 to 200 different universities and really forming strategic partnerships so that we could scale.
Great, great. So one of the interesting aspect which I really like in all of these products are like it's beautifully tied up with the research domain, and that's actually like a very, what to say, unique blend where we can see AI is actually solving a real unique business case where a domain plays an important part. So it's not just a pure AI which is actually running in a pure legacy use case, but it's having a different purpose, or it's repurposed actually, which is really nice actually. So that's the beauty of, I would say, that's the beauty of all these solutions. So, and my last question for today, and like, so what lies ahead of Summary team?
So going forward, again, looking at Web3, looking at more strategic partnerships, expanding into new markets with, government, communities. Very interesting. We do some work with Meta on building value-based communities, and I think this is a huge area of growth for us. Again, to form and nurture communities around shared values or complementary values or diverse values. We're currently doing some work with them around teacher education groups within Facebook, and so that's very interesting to us. And really just continuing to look at how we could deliver on the ROI for our clients, right? So they have all this data. How do we actually track it and measure and link it back to employee belonging, which is measured by high employee engagement, which we can absolutely measure and track and nudge. We're looking at productivity in terms of innovativeness, in terms of, again, disruption within the organization. And we're really looking at ways to expand company profitability. So our tools are used to decrease risk. They're used to increase employee belonging, to increase productivity, and to increase profitability. And so for us, we are a for-profit company, and being able to deliver and quantify and track over time this very independent assessment of all this money that corporations are putting into DE&I work and ESG work and all these mandates now, what is actually happening? Where is the progress being made, and how effective are the dollars being spent, and should they be allocated elsewhere? So we could tell all of that with our tools.
Great, great. Yeah, so that actually marks my entire questions for today, and you actually gave a lot of information about all these aspects in this particular space, and like how Summary team is actually building all these products very strategically, and like given this particular space, or like given in this particular resource functionality, how it's beautifully blending up with the entire domain. So it's purely incredible. And I would like to thank you, and I would like to for all the good contributions actually you are giving in this particular space. So like really, really great to hear your success story, and congratulations to the entire team.
Thank you. Very kind words. Thank you so much, Don. I so appreciated being here today.